today's show, we're breaking down the AI wearable craze. Do we all need to wear devices that record everything we say and do? Maybe. I don't know. But we are going to break down all the rumors, all the announcements, everything that's happening and impact on your business. Plus, stick around because Johnny Ive is involved in a new project to disrupt one of the most successful trillion-dollar businesses around, and we want to break down that for you. I'm your co-host, Kipp Bodner, Chief Marketing Officer at HubSpot. I'm joined by my co-host, Kieran Flanagan, who's the Chief Marketing Officer over at Zapier. This is Marketing Against the Grain, your show for marketing-minded people everywhere. All right, we're coming in hot from Dublin, Ireland. We got the river in the background.
Doing the Dublin thing again.
Yeah. I just had a nice little stroll down the river, met up with Kieran. We're doing a podcast because the AI wearables craze, just kind of came out of nowhere.
Right.
Basically, what I am seeing in the world is once somebody announced something, everybody's just like, boom, boom, boom. We're going to announce our thing that's like that. And the amount of stuff in AI wearables has been crazy. It all started oddly with Mark Zuckerberg.
Right.
And tell me your take on Zuckerberg's big product announcement. He's partnering with Ray-Ban to make AI sunglasses.
Right. He is going to make an affordable AI wearable in these glasses. One of the things I think got missed in the announcement, and actually the announcement kind of got drowned out by all of these other things.
We're coming into you hot with the announcement that really started it all, that nobody's actually talking much about.
It's really affordable. I think the price of these things are like $299, maybe a little bit more, but very, very affordable. They're going to allow you to interact in the world in a way that you have not been able to interact with the world through traditional laptops or iPods or phone. It's really another push towards every person is a creator because they allow people to broadcast at all times to their audience. And they're cool.
Well, they don't look weird.
They don't look weird. They look like they are just an everyday pair of glasses. And I think that's a big part of the wearables is you're not going to ever walk around the city in Apple's vision goggles, but the Ray-Bans could just be part of your everyday fashion accessory. And actually you could wear these things. Now, one of the things that actually happened when Google Glasses came out, I don't know if you know this, there were some stories, but people got beat up for wearing these things, right? That is one of
humans like their privacy, and this is one of the core issues at play with this.
People don't want to be recorded all of the time without your consent, right? But anyway, coming back, that was the announcement that I think started all of the PR battle for wearables, because a lot of things came after that, but I thought the Facebook one got lost a little bit in the noise.
Well, before we go on from the Facebook thing, I think what's interesting is they look like regular sunglasses.
Right.
They're not an invasive product. And I will tell you right now, if you are a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, you're a marketer, you're thinking about these new types of technologies as opportunities for your business, I personally believe right now that the first line of demarcation you can make is, do they require no change from the person behavior-wise, and do they look and feel normal? Quote unquote, to today's society. If they do, they might have a significant impact. If they don't meet those criteria, they're probably, like Google Glass was years ago, dead on arrival. A handful of people using them, nothing that interesting. The Ray-Bans fit both of those criteria. They look like regular sunglasses, but they can do a lot more. They don't require much behavior shift from the person wearing them, and then the people around them aren't really going to see that they're this very different type of AI sunglass opposed to just somebody wearing some sunglasses, which I think, to me, of all the AI announcements we're going to talk about from a hardware perspective, the Meta Ray-Bans were the best one.
Right.
They're by far the best one because they're just so ingrained into the normal flow of everybody's life where, we got to talk about the rewind pendant. The rewind pendant's weird.
We should do the rewind one. The one thing I will say that I'm fascinated by about the Facebook glasses and all of these wearable technologies is actually the shift in UX and how we actually interact with data. So if you think about what's happened over the evolution of technology, we had these big bulky computers, and then we distilled them down to a laptop, and then we distilled it down to a phone and an iPad, and we've just got easier ways to interact with data and interact with the world. AI is actually changing the kind of UX experience and how we actually use technology, because if you think about the Ray-Bans, you're just using natural language to interact with your apps, to interact with all of the technology that you can interact with behind the Ray-Bans. And I think that's a really important thing to think about for AI in general, is that people are thinking about how AI makes the thing I do better. But I think there's going to be examples, and we're going to cover some of them, how AI fundamentally changes how technology works. And the experience is going to be something very different from what you're doing today.
Well, right. And so there are some technology transformations that are just far better versions of the existing thing. Like, for example, like I'm reading the James Dyson biography, and he invents this brand new type of vacuum cleaner, this whole new type of technology. He goes to the existing vacuum industry. Nobody wants it because they're making $500 million a year selling vacuum bags.
Right.
And his whole technology, it's like, oh, I got rid of the vacuum bags. It's awesome. And they're like, well, we're making all this money, so we don't want to do this. So he goes and he launches a new business, builds this multi-billion-dollar business around this new type of vacuum. But the people using the vacuum are still just fucking using a vacuum, right? Like, it's still going the exact same way. You still hit the button and you move it around the floor. You're making the opposite point, which is like, oh, sometimes there are the rare technology changes where not only is the technology way better, but how we all adopt, use, and it impacts our daily life is completely different than the previous version. And that's the argument we're making with AI. That's why we're talking about wearables today, because I don't know if any of these wearables are actually going to be part of day-to-day society in any meaningful way, but they're the beginning kernels of what I think will be part of our society. Right?
The underlying interaction, UX experience is going to change. We're going to get into how it's going to change the phone space, the software space. I think we can touch on one more wearable, which was the Rewind one. That was a really great...
That's my least favorite of all of them. Come on.
I know.
And I'm a Rewind user, by the way. I do use Rewind.
I try to use it. I'm just not good at starting getting into new apps. Do you use that? Do you use it like every day?
I use it on the mobile app.
Okay.
And so it basically records my browsing, and so I can go back and really easily access browsing and screenshots and stuff, which is great. So that's what it is. Rewind it's kind of like an AI memory. So you can kind of records your phone or computer behavior, and you can go back and access it like a brain and ask it questions and do natural language against that. But the founder, Dan, late last week on Twitter, announced that they were going to launch a pendant. And it's like this little gray pendant on a necklace that you would wear around your neck. And it essentially just records your entire life.
Right.
And what I think this device is fairly stupid. Personally, I think it is going to not be part of society, but I really appreciate all of the "you wearing a wire" memes that I've been seeing, which is like, hey, for decades we hassled people for like, hey, am I being recorded? Are you wearing a wire? And it's like people are just going to wear public recording devices everywhere all the time. That feels like too much of a behavior jump for me.
I will take the opposite end of that spectrum.
Go.
I think maybe for our generation, it's too much of a stretch. I think that there is a generation who are coming up, and maybe teenagers now, who are used to having their entire life broadcast across social platforms, the Facebook.
But this is recording, not broadcasting. That's actually my challenge on it, is the inherent value to the human when it's recorded.
Recording with their phones. Like, they're constantly recording other people within their, their worldview is like, I can record whatever I want, right? Like,
totally.
And this is not that much. Like, do I believe we're going to a point where an entire person's life can be cataloged, indexed, and retrievable? Yes,
100%. Which is going to be amazing.
Do I believe that there is going to be a lot of turbulence to get there, and we're going to have a lot of people beating other people up for these wearable pendants? Maybe.
AI adoption up, fights up.
Fights up. Like, I would be incredibly uncomfortable to go out. Not that I really go out at nights anymore, but
you don't even leave your house. What are you talking about?
I go for dinners and have a glass of red wine. If I was at a good dinner, glass of red wine in hand, would I feel comfortable at that dinner having the same interactions with people
if you knew it always being recorded?
Always being recorded, right? So
drop a comment on the YouTube. What would you do if you were at dinner and somebody was wearing a pendant that was recording the entire thing?
But I will tell you what this is a great example of, and there's a good marketing lesson for our audience here. I don't know if it matters to Rewind if this is a success or
It
not.
does not.
I think what matters is this is an incredible PR.
They've sold like 1,500 pendants,
Right.
I think, like as of like 2 days ago when I saw Dan's most recent update, which is not nothing.
Right.
But they've gotten, to your point, a ton of publicity.
Ton of press.
And it's probably helping them stand out from the crowded pack of AI applications that are out there competing right now.
And it tells,
right?
it actually reinforces their brand story. Like your important information should be retrievable, should be indexable. Their actual desktop app, I actually wanted to use it, but it has a lot of, if you're using your work laptop, there's a lot of legalities to get over to use that app. But it actually ties into their brand strapline. It ties into their vision of the company. I do think there's something in that for all of us as marketers in terms of sometimes you should just launch a feature because it reinforces
Totally.
the product vision, reinforces the
even
company
if this
vision,
isn't a
creates
real
great PR.
long-term thing,
Yeah.
it tells everybody what we're about. It's a much better way of showing versus telling kind of the core value prop that they're trying to provide, which is to be kind of the outsourced brain and memory of your life, right? The thing I would say that I think that all of these early AI wearable announcements are also missing, all except the Meta glasses. I did not think I was going to be the biggest fan of the Meta glasses of all of these, because you also have the Humane Pin. There's a bunch of things.
What's the backpack?
Oh,
The
Microsoft has also filed a patent for an AI backpack. So like a smart backpack that I think can do a whole host of things in terms of analyzing its use, record, basically be a wearable from a bag and backpack perspective, which is early just a patent thing for Microsoft, but it's interesting. But the point I want to make here, Kieran, was in your disagreement with me on will people be okay recording, you thinking the generation below will be okay with it. I think you might be right, but they're only going to be right. You're only going to be right if they're going to get very discrete value. And I do not think what I would call single player mode is enough value. Where, the Rewind pendant or the Humane Pin or some of these other wearables, it's like, oh, me as the person using it, I'm the only one that gets benefit from that.
Right.
Whereas if I'm wearing it, the people around me or people I'm connected to on social networks, if they got value from it, then it's going to become much more socially acceptable, and you're going to create a flywheel of adoption. I think that's one of the things we've learned in the last 10 to 15 years of the internet is that marketplaces and networks have a ton of power, and they're kind of getting ignored in the early days of AI, and even in this case at AI wearables.
Yeah. I think again, it's a stretch, but the idea of having a second brain, we have a lot of tools like Notion, Evernote, and all those tools have promised it. This is actually, AI is actually the real coming to fruition of that second brain, right? You're actually able to, I've told you about using Bard for G Suite. Just being able to retrieve anything I've talked about really easily. When you start to plug in AI to the Zoom calls and then you auto export them into Google Docs, now you can retrieve any information you've had in terms of me and you having a Zoom call. I can retrieve any information from that. But I agree, but again, it's not too much of a stretch if you think of all these crazy cyclists. They all do the GoPro, and they're recording everything at all times. And so there's, again,
I think what you're doing is you're making a good point of hey, we're actually kind of further along in society here than you think. And while this is going to be a jump, it might not be as big of a jump as most of us would think at first blush of looking at these AI wearables.
But where I think this will work is in the second thing we're going to talk about, which is something I had not even considered about OpenAI, about to raise at $90 billion.
Totally. Okay. So as we're going into the last segment of the episode today, I thought of an old prayer that I would always hear around my computer growing up, which was God grant me the acceptance of things I cannot change, the courage to change things I can change, and the wisdom to know the difference. I was oh, that's pretty cool. God, give me the irrational confidence of Sam Altman. Oh, yeah. That's what I'm looking for here. When I grow up, I just want to have just complete unbridled confidence, because Sam Altman, he's selling secondary at an 80 to 90 billion dollar valuation. He's rolling on OpenAI, and he's you know what? This ain't enough. I'm going to go hire Johnny Ive to build an AI phone. and take on Apple. I'm already taking on Google. I'm partnering with Microsoft. And you know what I'm going to do? I am going to take on Apple in the phone game. That's bananas.
When I first heard of this, I thought about like the Facebook promise that they were always going to do a phone, just another company.
You thought it was a joke.
Who wants to do the phone. I thought they were going to try to do it, but I really didn't get what their unique value.
Yeah, why they could do it better than anybody else.
The iPhone is like an incredible device, right? Like it's entrenched in how we actually use mobile. iPhone and Android have a monopoly on those two things. Then I started to think through and started to listen about what their kind of plans were. Like Johnny Ives, what's he known for? What's the iPhone known for? Just an incredible, minimalistic, elegant design.
Johnny Ive is the best designer of our generation, of our lifetime, right? Like we know that to be true. And let's go back to why the iPhone was successful. The iPhone was successful because you had RIM, Research in Motion, which is a company that made a product called BlackBerry, and that had a physical keyboard. And and they were the leading smartphone in the world. And what RIM thought is like, look, our customers, their number one thing they love is this physical keyboard. Right. And we cannot give up this physical keyboard because we will lose our customer base. And that is our advantage. And all Apple did was say, oh, you don't need a physical keyboard. We can make a great on-screen keyboard, make the full touch screen, and change the form, function, and how people use and adopt a phone. Right? Like that's what changed.
Which makes the design much more elegant, much more cool,
way more
like
elegant.
Something that people actually want to be, seen.
Less boxy, less like a little nerdy keyboard rolling around. And Johnny Ive did that, and with Tony Fadell and a bunch of other people made that happen. And it's persisted for like 2 decades, right? Like it's pretty incredible. And you're kind of making the case after you dug into the OpenAI phone that you're like, oh, I don't know if they'll do it, but I actually see a case where they could have that same kind of disruption.
Well, the big thing that don't need in an AI powered phone is, first of all, you don't necessarily need the screen. Because you're just asking an AI to do something for you, and on the back end it does it. Now, I think humans are still going to need some sort of visual cue to know things, but you could drastically change that, and you don't need apps. So why does the iPhone look like this? Because you have a wall of apps, right? Now, I'm not going to show the home screen of mine because I don't want to get caught out like the CEO of X not having X on the homepage of the screen. I've got Zapier on my screen, but you do not need apps. You don't necessarily need the same sort of like visual aesthetics to actually interact with all of this data. Like there was a really good point made by Fridman on the All In podcast, and give him a lot of credit for making me like think through this, where he talked about what's happening with AI is functionality is being built into the chat experience, right? So you don't actually need to go click on all these apps. You just need to ask the chat or the AI to do something for you.
The
and
app
it's done
on the
within
back end, and the AI is going and doing the app.
And it's done all within the stream. We've made this point repeatedly. I made this point it's the one thing I've definitely been right about. On the Google search engine,
he pats himself on the back.
Which is like the AI chatbot pushes everything back one layer because it's doing that work for you. And I think that means that you can actually create an entirely new phone that looks very different from the iPhone. And I think the problem with most competitive phones is they still look like the iPhone. There's nothing like fundamentally different about them. But I think if you can create something smaller, more elegant, completely different shape, I am actually bullish on their ability to make some real progress at disrupting the traditional phones.
Yeah, the point you're making is like, oh, I understand the principles now that with AI, you could have a very, very different type of phone and mobile device. I don't know if, and I think what we're saying is, I don't know if OpenAI will do it. I don't know if Apple will do it, Microsoft, some other new startup. We don't know who's going to pull it off. Sam is smart in trying to hire the best designer of our generation. I mean, if OpenAI came out with a phone that was designed by Johnny Ive, like you and I would probably try it. Right. So like that, it would have to be good for us to like continue to use and adopt it. Right. But that's at least progress. We also know that this type of hardware takes like years to get right. So that's going to be bumpy.
It's a long-term bet.
It's a long-term bet. But at the same time, if you are a marketer out there, you're an entrepreneur out there, understand that the mobile experience and how we market to people on mobile is going to change a lot over the next decade. It's been pretty consistent for the last decade because the iPhone has been the dominant player in phone, and Samsung, and those two phones have very similar functionality and work in similar ways. As that changes, how we access, how we reach people is going to change. So it doesn't mean we need to change how we market to people today, but we need to be understanding as these new devices start hitting the market in the next year, 2, 3, that could have big implications for how we contact our customers, how like things like email, things like SMS, all of those channels we use today will probably be accessed in very different ways.
Right. It's like really the theme of this show is AI isn't just getting integrated into existing software and making that better. AI will create brand new categories. New category of wearable did not exist pre-AI.
AI is more than software.
Yeah,
it's actually the theme of this show. Most of what we talked about with AI has been around AI being software and how it's going to transform software. And whether these wearables are going to be a hit or not doesn't matter, but they're emblematic that AI is going to be much bigger than just software, and how we all interact with each other and our customers is going to change more over the next decade than it has in a long time.
Right. What device, out of all the devices we've talked about, what's the one you would get?
Facebook Meta, the Meta Ray-Bans, like the Humane pin, which is like this weird AI pin that records and does some projecting. It's kind of a VR device. Like, I'm not that into it. I don't want the rewind pendant to record all of my movements. There's a couple other like kind of recording devices from startups out there. Not that interested. I'm going glasses. What about you?
I'm going glasses. I think that the one thing that I look at, and you can just integrate them into your life, and I think they will be actually day one very, very useful. Now, the only reason I wouldn't use glasses if I need a Meta account, a Facebook account, because I don't use Facebook, so I'm not going to create a Facebook account.
I also want to say the other thing before we go is that the Mark Zuckerberg, Lex Fridman VR interview, if you have not seen that, they did this. Go to Lex Fridman's podcast. They've got, and we can I'm sure cut a 10 seconds into the show. They're doing basically a live podcast, but through the new Oculus technology. That's basically it's very similar to the Apple Vision Pro technology, where it's basically projecting a 3D version of you in this basically metaverse, and they're talking to each other, and Lex is going through and talks about the whole experience of how it's the best in-person, non-interperson interaction he's ever had. And I think it's another good thing. Today's show is really about the future.
Right.
And that's a good thing to go and look at to see, I could see how we are meeting and interacting like this in the future much, much more.
Yeah, it's I love the tweet where someone was showcasing it and said they picked the two perfect people to do this because they're expressionless. Yeah. And so when you actually use that technology, what's actually happening is they're scanning your face and doing like 3 or 4 expressions. So you don't have actually all full facial, all the expressions a human can do. And so picking Lex and Mark were like perfect because they only really have 3 or 4 expressions.
I am a robot.
Yeah.
I like
jiu-jitsu. The closest you can get to like robotic anyway.
Do you like jiu-jitsu? I do like jiu-jitsu. What's your favorite jiu-jitsu move? I like AI and I like computers, right? Like that's kind of what they are like. But so I think that's a good point.
It does show you how early we are in things like remote work, how we interact with each other across the
early.
globe. Like it's all going to be done within VR.
All right. Leave us a comment of which of the new AI wearables you would actually consider using, and if any, and if you're anti-AI wearables, we want to hear about that. This has been kind of a little glimpse into the future. We're going to be back real soon with a new episode of Marketing Against the Grain.
This data is wrong every freaking time.
Have you heard of HubSpot? HubSpot is a CRM platform where everything is fully integrated.
Whoa, I can see the client's whole history, calls, support tickets, emails, and here's a task from 3 days ago I totally missed.
HubSpot. Grow better.